Stop the car now. Have you ever felt something so wrong in your chest that it scared you more than the danger itself? Before this story begins, take a second to subscribe to my channel, because the stories I share here are real emotions, real instincts, and real moments that change lives forever. This one saved mine. And my husband's. I didn't scream often, I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't the kind of woman who panicked over shadows or bad dreams. That's why when the words tore out of my mouth that night raw, loud, shaking, even I didn't recognize my own voice. Stop the car, now. My husband glanced at me, confused, irritation flickering across his face for just a second. The headlights cut through the empty stretch of highway ahead of us, the road slick with recent rain, reflecting the moon like broken glass. We were miles away from the nearest town, surrounded by nothing but trees and darkness. What? He said. What are you talking about? I don't know, I whispered, my heart slamming so hard I could hear it in my ears. Just stop. Please. My hands were clenched in my lap, nails digging into my skin. My breathing was shallow, uneven, like my lungs had forgotten how to work. Something was wrong. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't justify it. But every part of me was screaming. My husband, Mark, slowed the car but didn't stop completely. Did you see something? He asked, scanning the road. There's nothing out here. I know, I said, my voice breaking. That's the problem, he sighed. A soft exhale meant to calm me, but it did the opposite. You're just tired. It's been a long day. We should get home. Home, that word felt distant, unreal, like something I might never reach if we kept moving forward. No, I said. Louder this time. Mark, I'm serious. Stop the car. The tires rolled another few feet before he finally pulled over to the narrow shoulder. The engine idled, humming softly, almost mockingly. He turned toward me, his brow furrowed. Talk to me, he said. What's going on? I opened my mouth, then closed it again. How do you explain a feeling that has no shape? No image, no sound, just dread. Cold, sharp dread curling in your stomach. I feel like we shouldn't be here, I said finally. Like if we go any farther, something bad is going to happen. Mark rubbed his face with one hand. Babe, we've driven this road a dozen times. I know, I said. But not like this. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. The darkness felt heavier somehow, pressing in on the car. I suddenly had the irrational urge to lock the doors, even though they already were. Mark looked at me for a long moment. I could see the conflict in his eyes, logic versus trust. He was a practical man, an engineer, facts, numbers, reasons. Instincts weren't his thing, but he loved me. Okay, he said slowly. We'll sit for a minute. Just breathe, I nodded, but my chest refused to loosen. My gaze kept drifting to the side mirror. The road behind us was empty, too empty. Earlier that evening, everything had been normal, boring even. We'd left a friend's anniversary dinner later than planned, laughing about burnt chicken and terrible music. The rain had started just as we got into the car, light at first, then heavier, drumming against the roof. I'll take the back road, Mark had said. Less traffic. I hadn't argued. I never did. The back road was quiet, familiar. Or at least it used to be. About 15 minutes into the drive, I'd felt it the shift. Like the air in the car had changed density, my skin prickled. My thoughts started racing without direction. Do you feel that? I'd asked casually, not wanting to sound crazy. Feel what? Mark replied. Nothing, I said quickly. Just cold. But it wasn't cold, it was wrong. The farther we drove, the stronger it became. Every mile marker felt like a countdown. My instincts, something I'd ignored my entire life, were pounding on the door of my mind, demanding to be heard. Now, sitting on the side of the road, I hugged myself, trying to ground my thoughts. We should turn around, I said. Mark hesitated. The next exit is only a few minutes ahead. No, I said again. Not ahead. He studied me, really studied me this time. My hands were trembling. Tears burned behind my eyes, uninvited and humiliating. You're scaring me, he admitted softly. I'm scared too, I whispered. Silence settled between us. Then, faintly, I heard something. Mark, I said slowly. Do you hear that? He turned off the radio. We listened, we waited. At first, there was nothing. Just the rumble of the engine and the sound of the wind rushing past the windows. But then, there it was, a distant sound, metallic, rhythmic. Tap, tap, tap. My stomach just dropped. I looked over at Mark. That's probably just a branch, he said. but his voice sounded thin, lacking any real conviction. "It's not," I said, my own voice barely a whisper. "It's getting closer." The tapping grew louder, more insistent. Closer to the rear of the car. My breath hitched in my throat as I realized it wasn't coming from the trees lining the road. It was coming from the road itself, from right behind us. "Someone's there," I whispered. Mark's hand instinctively shot to the door lock, clicking it again even though I knew it was already locked. He leaned forward, squinting into the darkness of the side mirror. "I don't see any tap." Something struck the trunk of the car. Hard. I screamed. It was a raw, primal sound that ripped from my throat. "Drive," I shouted. "Mark, drive." The engine roared to life as he slammed his foot on the gas. The tires spun for a heart-stopping second before finally catching on the asphalt. The car lurched forward and the tapping was replaced by a loud, sickening thud as whatever or whoever it was lost their grip. What the hell was that? Mark yelled, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "I don't know," I sobbed, the words tumbling out between panicked breaths. "I don't know, but just don't stop." The road ahead twisted sharply, the trees forming these dark, impenetrable walls on either side. My heart felt like it was going to explode out of my chest. Against my better judgment, I twisted in my seat, forcing myself to look behind us. And that's when I saw him. A man was standing in the middle of the road we'd just escaped from. He was tall, perfectly still, just watching us disappear into the darkness. His face was pale, almost glowing in the fading beam of our taillights. He wasn't waving for help, he wasn't trying to flag us down. He was smiling. "Mark," I whispered, my voice so quiet I could barely hear it myself. He was smiling. "Don't look back," he said, his voice firm. Just don't look back. We drove in absolute silence for what felt like an eternity. The only sound was the rhythmic scrape of the windshield wipers, pushing away a light drizzle that had started to fall. I couldn't get my hands to stop shaking. Eventually, Mark slowed the car. "We need to call the police," he said, his voice strained. "No," I said immediately, the word escaping before I could even think. "Just get us home." "But, please," I begged him, the tears starting to well up again. "I can't handle anything else right now. Just please take me home." He nodded, his jaw tight, and took the very next exit he saw. The rest of the drive was a complete blur. When we finally pulled into our driveway, I felt like I'd been holding my breath for hours. Inside the house, my legs gave out from under me and I collapsed onto the couch. Mark locked the front door, then checked the lock again, and again, and stood over me. "I should have listened to you sooner," he said quietly. I looked up at him, the tears spilling freely down my face now. I don't even know what I was listening to. Sleep was impossible that night. Every single time I closed my eyes, I saw that smile. Calm, certain, like he knew something we didn't. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a news alert on the newsstand. "Local couple injured in highway attack." My blood ran cold as I opened the article. It was the same road. The same exact stretch of highway, less than a mile from where we'd stopped. According to the police, a man had been using a metal object to disable cars, forcing them to stop. When the drivers got out to inspect the damage, he would attack. One of the victims was in critical condition. I dropped my phone, my hand flying to my mouth as a sob tore out of me. Mark rushed over and knelt in front of me, reading the article over my shoulder. All the color drained from his face. "That could have been us," he whispered. I just nodded, unable to speak. For the first time in my life, I understood something with a terrifying, bone-deep clarity. That voice inside of me, that little flicker of intuition I ignored and laughed off for so many years it had saved our lives. And I knew, right then and there, that it was a voice I would never ever ignore again. For 3 days, I didn't leave the house. Not because Mark told me to stay or because anyone else suggested it. I just couldn't. Every single time I reached for the doorknob, my chest would tighten like an invisible hand was squeezing my lungs. The world outside felt dangerous now, like a place I'd completely underestimated my whole life. Mark tried to be gentle. "Just to the mailbox," he'd say, keys already in his hand. "You don't even have to step off the porch." But I'd just shake my head, pulling my sweater tighter around me even though the house was warm. "I'm fine right here," I'd say. He never pushed. That was one of the things I loved about him. He would just sit beside me, his arm around my shoulders, and we'd both stare at the muted TV without really saying it. The news kept replaying the story. The same words, the same phrases. Random attack. Suspects still at large. public urge to remain cautious. Every time they showed the map of the area, my stomach would flip. A red circle pulsed over the exact stretch of road where my instincts had screamed at me, where terror had exploded in my chest. "I can't stop thinking about it," I whispered one evening. "I know," Mark said. "Me neither," but there was something different in his voice, something heavier. Maybe it was guilt. Or fear he hadn't allowed himself to feel yet. That night, as we lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. I just listened to his breathing. The house creaked and settled like it always did, but now every sound felt amplified, threatening. "Mark?" I murmured into the darkness. "Yeah? Do you think?" "He would have killed us." There was a long pause, too long. "Yes," he said quietly. "I do." Tears slid silently into my hair. I rolled onto my side, facing him, pressing my forehead into his chest as if I needed physical proof that he was still there, that we were both safe. "I almost didn't stop," he confessed, his hand tightening on my back. "When you first started yelling, I almost kept driving." "But you didn't," I said. "Because you were terrified," he replied. "I'd never seen you look like that before. Neither had I. The police called the next day." I didn't want to answer at first. Mark picked up, spoke for a few minutes, then handed me the phone with a look I couldn't quite read. "They want to ask you some questions," he said. My mouth went dry. "About what?" "About the man you saw." I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself. "Okay." The officer's voice was calm, professional. He asked me to describe everything I could remember. Height, build, clothing, the way he stood, the way he smiled. "That smile," I said, my voice shaking despite my best effort to stay composed. It wasn't angry, it was like he knew we were already afraid. There was a pause on the line. "That's consistent with what other witnesses have reported," the officer said. Witnesses, plural. After the call ended, I felt completely hollowed out, as if the fear had finally drained me. "Do you regret stopping?" Mark asked gently. I didn't hesitate for a second. "No, even knowing what it's done to you?" he asked. I looked at him, really looked at him. His tired eyes, the faint dark circles that hadn't been there before. The way his hands still reached for mine like he was afraid I'd disappear. "I'd rather be scared than dead," I said. A week passed. Then another. Slowly, life tried to inch back toward normal. Mark went back to work. I forced myself outside in small doses first, just standing on the porch, then walking to the end of the driveway, breathing through the panic until its grip loosened. Then, one afternoon, Mark came home early. His face was pale. "They caught him," he said. My heart stuttered. "Who?" "The guy." From the highway, I sank onto the couch as my knees gave out. "They arrested him 2 counties over," Mark continued, his voice low. "He had tools in his trunk, metal rods. Tire spikes." I closed my eyes, a wave of nausea washing over me. I had to ask, "Did they say how many?" Mark took a deep breath, his voice heavy. 4 confirmed victims. 2 didn't make it. The walls of the room seemed to close in, the air getting thick and hard to breathe. "I just keep thinking," I whispered, the words barely audible, "if I'd ignored that feeling like I usually do ... But you didn't," Mark said, his tone firm, breaking through my spiraling thoughts. "You listened. That night, something changed between us. It wasn't bad. It was ... raw. Vulnerable, we sat and talked for hours, really talked. We talked about fear, about trust, and about all those tiny moments in our lives when we pushed aside our instincts because they didn't seem logical. He told me about a time back in college. He'd had a bad feeling, a gut feeling telling him not to go somewhere, but he ignored it. He ended up in a serious accident. Then it was my turn. I told him how I was raised, how I was always taught not to overreact, not to be dramatic, not to make a fuss. Just quiet down and carry on. "Maybe that's the problem," he said, his voice soft but clear. "We're taught to doubt ourselves." Those words hit me hard. They stuck with me, replaying in my mind over and over. A few months passed. I was finally driving alone again for the first time since the incident. It was a bright day. The highway was bustling with cars. Logically, everything was fine. I knew I was safe. But as I neared a quieter stretch of road, I felt my hands instinctively tighten on the steering wheel. And then I felt it again, that same familiar shift inside me. This time it wasn't panic, it was different, it was awareness. Up ahead, a car was slowing down in a weird way, kind of drifting towards the shoulder. Something about it just felt wrong. Every rational part of my brain told me to ignore it, to just drive past. But I didn't. I listened. I changed lanes, putting as much distance as I could between my car and that one. Just seconds later, the car swerved violently, smashing hard into the guardrail. I pulled over, my heart pounding in my chest, but I was completely safe. I watched as the emergency vehicles started to arrive, their lights flashing in the distance. And as I sat there, one thought echoed through my mind, loud and undeniable. That voice inside me, it wasn't fear, it was information. And it had just saved me again. When I got home and told Mark what happened, he gently held my face in his hands and kissed my forehead. "I trust you," he said, and I knew he meant it. Always. That night, for the first time since that terrible night on the highway, I slept without any nightmares. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long, long time. But deep down, somewhere in that quiet, healing part of myself, I knew this story wasn't over. It couldn't be. Because sometimes surviving something doesn't mean the danger is gone. I thought surviving it meant it was over. That's what people say, right? You get through the worst moment of your life, and everything after that is supposed to feel lighter. Like you've paid some invisible price and earned peace. But for me, that's not how it worked at all. The trauma didn't just leave a scar. It opened something up inside me. At first, the changes were small, easy to explain away. I'd get this prickly feeling on my skin in grocery store parking lots, a sense of being watched. I'd hesitate before opening the door, even when I was expecting someone. At night, I'd check the locks, then check them again, my fingers trembling as if the door might just unlock itself to spite me. My husband, Mark, he noticed, of course. "You okay?" He'd ask gently when he caught me staring out the window for too long, and I'd always say the same thing. "I'm fine." A lie I was starting to believe myself. But I wasn't fine. The truth was, listening to my instincts that first time, it was like unlocking a door I never knew existed. And once it was open, it refused to close. I started sensing things before they happened. It wasn't mystical, nothing dramatic. Just these quiet, certain warnings. A sudden tightening in my chest, an overwhelming urge to change my route while walking. A feeling that didn't argue or shout, it just was. Most of the time, nothing came of it. I learned to live with that constant, low-level hum of anxiety. I learned to trust it without panicking. Until the night it came back, stronger than ever. It was a Thursday, ordinary, forgettable. Mark and I were driving home from dinner. The radio was low, the city lights blurred past the windows. I was relaxed, almost happy, thinking maybe, just maybe, I'd finally moved on. And then it hit me, like a physical blow. "Mark," I said, my voice suddenly tight. "Slow down." He did immediately. He's learned not to question it. "What is it?" he asked, his eyes scanning the road. I looked ahead. Traffic was light. Everything looked normal. "I don't know," I said, my heart hammering. "But we need to turn, now?" He didn't argue. He flicked on the signal and took the next right turn without a second of hesitation. The moment our car cleared the intersection, a deafening crash exploded behind us. Mark slammed on the brakes, twisting in his seat to look back. A massive truck had barreled through the red light we'd just avoided, plowing straight into the space we would have occupied. Glass shattered, horns screamed. If we'd gone straight, we would have been right there. Mark just stared at me, his face completely pale in the flashing city lights. "You felt that," he whispered. It wasn't a question. I nodded, tears blurring my vision. I did. We just sat there shaking as sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. It happened again. Another near miss. Another invisible line we hadn't crossed. Later that night, sitting in the quiet of our living room, Mark said something that changed everything for me. "Maybe it's not just about danger," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "Maybe it's about timing, awareness, just being present." I wanted to believe him. I really, really did. But deep down, a much darker thought was taking root. What if surviving that first night didn't just sharpen my instincts? What if it marked me somehow? Put me on a list? The emails started a month later. The first one was short, no subject line. The body just said, "You listened." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding against my ribs. No name, no context, just those two words. I deleted it, telling myself it was a fluke. The second email came 2 days later. This one was just as chilling. Not everyone does. I still didn't tell Mark. I convinced myself it was a coincidence. Spam, some kind of sick, twisted joke. But the third email erased all doubt. The road remembers you. My stomach turned. That night I showed Mark everything. He read the messages one by one, his jaw tightening with every word. "We're calling the police," he said, his voice firm. They tried to trace the emails, but it was no use. Public Wi-Fi. Burner accounts, nothing solid. The detective suggested it was probably some obsessed follower of the case, someone who'd read my statement in the news. But I knew this was something else. This wasn't just an observer. This person was connected to what happened. They knew things only I could know. They knew I was listening. And that's what terrified me the most. Who was sending these emails, and what did they want from me? I'm sharing this now because I need to understand. Has anyone else ever experienced something like this? A feeling, an instinct that saved you, but then left you with something. The detective told me people latch onto stories like this, especially when instinct plays a role. It scares them. Honestly, it scared me too. For a while, the strange emails stopped. Life tried to go back to a fragile version of normal. I returned to work, started laughing more, and even began to believe the worst was finally behind us. Then one evening, I got home before Mark. The house just felt off. It wasn't messy, and there was no sign of a break-in. It was just a deep, unsettling feeling of wrongness. I stood there in the doorway, keys still clutched in my hand, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling a little. The silence that answered was heavy, absolute. That's when the instinct hit me like a tidal wave, cold and commanding. "Don't go in." I immediately stepped back out onto the porch, and just as I did, my phone rang. It was Mark. "Where are you?" he asked, his voice urgent. "I'm outside," I managed to say. "Something's wrong with the house." "Don't move," he said instantly, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I'm calling 911. The police arrived within minutes. They were thorough, searching the house room by room. They found nothing missing, nothing damaged, nothing except for one thing. On the inside of our bedroom window, someone had written a message in the dust. 2 simple words. Still listening? I just broke down right there. Full body sobs that I couldn't control. Mark held me tightly while the officers spoke in hushed, serious voices nearby. They recommended everything: increased patrols, security cameras, a new alarm system, detailed safety plans. We did it all. And slowly, thankfully, the messages stopped. No more emails, no more strange signs, no more of those chilling feelings. Time passed. A year went by, then 2. The sharp edge of fear dulled into a distant memory. That instinct, once a source of terror, quieted down, settling into something manageable. It started to feel less like a curse and more like a gift. One night, I was sitting on the couch with Mark, and a profound realization washed over me. "I'm not afraid anymore," I said, the words surprising even myself. He smiled, relieved. "Good. No," I corrected him softly. "You don't understand. I'm not afraid of listening." And that was the crucial difference. So many people live their lives trying to numb that little voice inside them. They drown it out with logic or politeness or self-doubt. I had done that for years. But the night I screamed at my husband to stop the car, everything changed. I realized that voice, that instinct, doesn't exist to make us afraid. It exists to keep us alive. A few months ago, I received one final email. It contained just one sentence. "You were never meant to be next." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I've learned that some instincts are there to warn you of danger, while others are there to remind you that you survived for a reason. And if there's one thing I know now, one thing I will never, ever question again, it's this. When that quiet, insistent voice inside you says stop, you stop.